Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much. Those are the, all of our sessions for today. We had a wonderful 2 days, and I appreciate everyone for all their support, uplifting words, and all the conversations that I'm seeing out of here. I promised everyone there would be a present, a gift from me to you for at the end today, and I will share that in a moment. We heard you loud and clear. You love the town hall, and we're bringing 2 more hours of town hall with an additional guest who you'll meet when we start that. In the meanwhile, let me share my gift with you, and it'll take a moment to come up. All right. So, as I promised, I have a gift for all of you as attendees. It's a gift of time, a gift of removing a burden we've all been bearing as Black people. Hmm. Is this not working? Okay. Invariably, as Black people, and especially in the midst of this movement, we've been approached by well intentioned white colleagues and friends with a simple question. I want to help and all. How do I get started? While we appreciate that our white friends are trying to help, it still shouldn't fall on us to educate them. Sometimes when people ask me the simplest question, they can just type in their phones. I take the time to use the most passive aggressive site in creation. Let me Google that for you because for real. In this talk, I'm going to offer a simpler approach. We will make a So You Want to Be an Accomplice training resource, and you'll be able to download the QR code for this and show it on your phone or print it out for a potential accomplice. I chose the word accomplice because we need people to get in the trenches with us and help us do the work we can't. Our team is loaded with accomplices who saw my vision and put in the work to make it happen. Too often, I'm an ally has been used as a permanent state of being rather than transitory. You can be an ally in the moment and the next decide it's not convenient for you to uphold the alliance. So be an accomplice, not an ally. So the beginner level of this course is accepting hidden bias. This book, The Blind Spot, walks through realizing how we have been programmed with subconscious bias by our society. When the morning news parades Black people being arrested, when movies and TV shows cast Black people as criminals, drug dealers, and gangbangers, when the president and first lady use their podiums to talk about us as super predators, when he takes pictures in the front of a group of inmates at the base of Stone Mountain, the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, the view of Black people as criminals are reinforced and the messages is resent out. The authors use their metaphor of the blind spot in our eyes that our brain hides from us unless we seek it out. Then they ask the readers to perform a series of experiments to help them identify the cultural blind spots in their brains hidden from them. At the intermediate level, we need to acknowledge that slavery still exists. Ava DuVernay did a great job at exposing the flaw in the 13th Amendment, pointing out how it abolished slavery on paper, how the loophole has been abused to continue the slave trade, where today we as a country with 5% of the population have 25% of the imprisoned population of the world. As Van Jones says in the intro, 1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled in the world, are locked up here in the supposed land of the free. I added supposed, but that's what it is. It's a supposed land of the free. How different will you look at the prison and police system once you realize that the end result of our justice system has a financial outcome? The 3/5 law has nothing on the current debate of what city gets to count prisoners as part of their census, while denying them the vote and honest pay for a day's labor. At the advanced level, we need to realize that racism has held America back. How much cognitive capital have we lost to racism, to poverty against Black people? This is an advanced topic, and many white people are not ready for this talk. Carol Anderson walks us through the turning points in America's history and demonstrates how white rage, or as it has been termed to soften the blow, backlash, has been used to help hold the country back. From 40 acres and a mule to the election of Barack Obama, every bit of progress for Black America has been met with a massive reaction from white America. Finally, as a bonus, we can look at whiteness as a tool of oppression. Ta-Nehisi Coates gave me a new realization when he says self-identified white people. Whiteness is a tool of oppression. From the white man's burden to manifest destiny, whiteness formed the identity of America. John Brown's revolt, in which poor white people joined with Black slaves in a revolution to end slavery. For his effort, John Brown was the first person to be executed for treason in America. Virginia, in response, created the first slave patrols and declared that basically white people will always be above Black people. As Lyndon Baines Johnson said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. Whiteness in America has expanded to ensure it is the majority group. When Irish immigrants came to America, they were treated as undesirables until it was more advantageous to let them have the white identity. The same thing happened with Italian immigrants. As long as you place whiteness above all else, you will enjoy the privileges of whiteness. The final level of mastery of becoming an accomplice is to divest yourself of the white identity put upon you until you're willing, as Jane Foster says, to receive the same treatment as in America as a Black person. You still have much further to go. I offer this resource to all of my fellow Black people who are tired of answering that same question. We will put this on our website and generate a QR code that you can put on your phone. You can print out as business cards. And when you're asked, how can I help? Just hand it out and move on. Relieve yourself of that burden. This is my gift to you. Our platform is my gift to you. Thank you so much for everything you've done in making this a smashing success. Let me read off some numbers right quick. According to our tech lead, we received 11,500 unique views yesterday. On the track 1 video, we received 12,500 views and 18,957 clicks. 70% of the time was being watched. On the track 2 video, we received a little bit less, 872 views, 13,776 clicks, 37% of it being watched. The chat on track 1 had over 2,785 messages and 3,146 likes, while the track 2 chat had 321 messages and 305 likes. Obviously, you're validated my thought that this is something needed and something necessary in the Black community. I thank you for joining us on this journey. And as a bonus, like I said, we will be having a 2-hour continuation of our town hall. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you on behalf of the team that worked so diligently to put this together. And thank you for showing us that Black Lives Matter. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.
Hey everyone.
No, you got some echo.
So it looks like we're on and the panel is officially started.
Hey everyone, we're on now.
We're on.
Okay.
Michael, can you hear my audio okay?
Yeah, I do. We're live. Are we still waiting for the rest of the
There'll be a few more joining us, right?
the panel? Yes.
I got a message here that says it's only the three of us. It's just us.
Okay, there's some more coming through.
Okay. Thanks for hanging in there with us, everyone. We've got people running from the living room, from the dining room, from the bathroom, all over places. We'd normally be saying that we're running from one conference room to another, but at home, it's a different story.
You next.
There we go.
Okay. We've got 2 more, I believe, coming through.
So as everyone starts to, I think I'm but I'm going to try to fix it.
So Valerie, your audio is coming in very echoey.
Okay, is it better now?
There you
Much
go.
better.
There we go. Technical difficulties averted.
All right.
Awesome. So since we are waiting for a few more people to jump in, and really start the town hall, I think it would be a perfect time for us to just go ahead and start the conversation and get this going. And is my sound better now? I know I'm a little low.
Great. It sounds great here.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I know I had to miss the last bit of the town hall trying to get everything else together on the back end of things. But I would love to just pick up the conversation where we left off. I believe the last few questions I heard were how people were feeling when other people would ask them what can they do to help. I know that was a conversation. Do we want to pick up there, or do we have any other topics we want to talk about?
I like picking it up there primarily because it really speaks to moving forward. We have so much behind us, and we're carrying so much weight. we have a lot of baggage that we're dealing with. And so I think it's important to really talk about what can happen from this point forward. And I'm one of those people that gets asked a lot, what can I do from my white counterparts and even other ethnicities? And I've found it. I have to keep in mind that we're trying to move forward, and so I used to be reluctant to actually, kind of receiving that question in kind of an open way, because to me it seemed more like a rhetorical question. Because if I were to give a suggestion, I wouldn't imagine that anyone would follow through on it. But in this day, in this space now, I don't believe that to be true. I honestly believe, I want to believe, have to believe that when someone asks me that question, it's genuine. And even if it isn't, I'm going to act as if it is, and actually give input, give suggestions. One of which would be to really kind of empower them to kind of step into our shoes and take a look at things, what we've been through, what we've been trying to say all along, and just really kind of explain to them certain things. And I'll give a perfect example. Juneteenth. Now, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I just found out what Juneteenth was all about maybe 5 years ago. It's not something that was taught in school. It's not something that I heard about in my neighborhood. And I grew up in New York, a very diverse area, as Frank can admit to. But this was completely new to me, and it really threw me off. And my pastor last week had said that, we have to allow people the space not to know. And a lot of that, sometimes it's a matter of ignorance, sometimes it's a matter of just choosing not to see what's there, to see what's blatant. But we're in a time right now where, the blinders are off and everybody can see. It's hard to deny what we've been saying all along. So at this particular point, we need to come forward with answers. And I think one of those answers is to empower each other so that when our counterparts, whether it be white or someone else, looks at us, that they actually see us on a level playing field. It's going to take a lot to get there. But if we empower each other to actually do that, galvanize, come together, especially in this tech space, there's so much that we can do. You all are brilliant. What I've seen occur here in the last 2 weeks has blown my mind. I'm thinking about going back to school just so I can do a thesis on it. And it's unreal. The world doesn't know that we're this capable. And the thing that has impressed me probably even more than just the speakers that we've had and this panel is to look at the volunteers behind the scene and just how diverse it is and how people have just poured into the movement. This is something that's worthy of a behind the scenes view and look, because this is an example when someone should ask the question, what can we do? Let me show you how Juneteenth was produced, what actually happened, how everybody came together. Everyone took off their hats, and I know there are people that are managers and then people that are senior engineers and engineers, but in this particular scenario, everyone was working together. I didn't see people wearing their hearts or their feelings on their sleeves, and we got it done. We can do this, and that's an example of how we show the world that we can move forward.
Yes, yeah.
I need to take all that time. I need to stop watch next time, I guess.
Oh, we got time to chat. I definitely want to. When you said we can do this, it reminded me of our mascot, which was Avatar, who was donated to us along with our logo by Havana Wynn, who reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you need some graphic design work, I can pitch in." And her first draft of it was a take on Rosie the Riveter, and she had her breaking out of a frame or a phone, and I said, "Can we just put a crowd behind her so she's like in front of this movement?" And she said, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And boom, like the next day she turned around. I was like, "That's it. We can do it." And she's helping us lead our movement. And I named her June.
I love it.
Like you said, so many people came together to make this happen. And I guess we didn't know it shouldn't have. We didn't know enough to know that it shouldn't have been done, but we did it.
Absolutely.
Oh, let me welcome in Portia. Portia, you've got to introduce yourself because I don't want to say you're with the wrong publisher.
That's fair. Hi, everybody. I'm Portia Burke. I'm a senior editor at Random House. I'm happy to be here. I'm just here.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. You help lead projects like Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi.
Oh God, no.
Oh no.
No, I wouldn't. I'm not. I'm definitely not Ta-Nehisi's editor. That's the
Okay.
great Chris Jackson at One World. I've worked at Random for 16 years in a variety of capacities. I was Maya Angelou's last editor at Random House. I started working with her on her second cookbook in 2010. And then when her full-time editor at Random House, or her long-time editor, excuse me, retired in 2011, then I was able to take that mantle forward until the time she passed away. I did also edit the 35th anniversary edition of the Black Book, which was originally edited by Toni Morrison when she was an editor at Random House. So over those 16 years, my current authors include John Meacham, who's the Pulitzer Prize winning historian who did his first book on theology, The Hope of Glory. That's my first New York Times bestseller, so that came out earlier this year. I'm also the acquiring editor for Candace Marie Benbow, who is a theologian, baker, writes for Essence magazine, generally in the religion inspirational space. But we are working on an essay collection together. Most of my acquisitions right now I do acquire for our religious imprints and also for our pop culture gift imprints at Clarkson Potter. So I've also acquired a very fun project called Hip Hop Queens Oracle Deck. So imagine an Oracle deck of cards, but instead of traditional tarot imagery, it's, you know, MC Light, Mickey D, Spinderella, Salt and Pepper, Bahamadia, Beyonce's in there. And so you know, it's quite a time to be in the book publishing world right now, to have experienced working there for such a long amount of time and having been Black that entire time, but having only been called Black for the past, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Because, I mean, come on, like, you know, people are very, you know, they'll cast their eyes down when they talk about you as a beautiful African-American girl, right? Because it's been uncomfortable and it's a corporate space as much as it is a cultural curation space. You know, on the day-to-day, I work in an office, well, I used to, you know, work in an office building. So it's been complicated, but I love what I get to do for a living. So gratitude is the overwhelming emotion for the most part.
I think that's the perfect thing. You know, like we love what we do and we're grateful to be in these spaces. And what I'm ready to do is open the doors. You know, there's so much I don't want to necessarily call it nepotism and cronyism, but that happens. We know that. We know a lot of doors get open because a guy knows a guy, and we need to start doing the same. You know, several people on this stage right now, a number of people who are involved in the project are hey, I know this guy or this girl and let's bring them on. Let's put them on. So I thank Portia for jumping in like literally 15 minutes ago to fill out our panel some more. Frank and I, like I said, went to college together, and you know, reached out to him, and he got involved with the project very early. And you know, all of this is about networking, and you know, it's not necessarily. You know, like I said, I don't believe in reverse racism because, you know, until you go back in time and change who got carried over to these shores and who got treated as second class citizens, racism is about a system, not just the individual. But I you know, I have no qualms in saying, hey, I know this person, I know they're great. I'm not going to recommend them just because of their skin color. I'm going to recommend them because I know they're good, and not many other people will. So, that's part of my thoughts on opening up our own doors as well, but also opening up the doors where we do get in.
So we have to do that. Like a bunch of us have been very successful in our careers, right? A bunch of us have reached the pinnacles of our careers. And a lot of times when we get in that space, we're one of the only ones in that space, so we feel uncomfortable, and we're just sort of trying to hold on. We can't be like that. We have to not just mentor. We have to mentor, but we have to not just mentor. We have to sponsor. We have to bring up everyone else as well. Because as you know, Mike, you and I talk about this all the time, right? I grew up in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 70s and the 80s during the crack era. And, I knew a bunch of people that didn't make it that were way smarter than me. Why the heck did I go to Williams College? Same thing with you in Chicago, right? You grew up a bunch of people that didn't make it that, may have been smarter than you. Why didn't they make it? The systemic problems are there. I'm not one who's ashamed to say, you know what? This person is African American. This person's Latino. This person's African. I'm pulling them in. Like, that's it, right? I'm not saying they may be the best. They may not be the best. This is someone that I'm investing my time and my effort in bringing them through because no one else is investing their time and effort in bringing them through.
Right. Maybe we need to start talking about Black privilege, right?
But I think the one thing you just spoke about, Frank, that really stood out to me is the fact that everyone is talking about mentoring. I think after everything that's been happening, all of the messages that a lot of white folk have been sending out, saying like, what can I do to help? Do you need mentorship? That is really frustrating to me because look at what we were able to accomplish in 2 weeks, right? We did all of this. And it's because for as long as we can remember, we've always had to be twice as good to get half of what they got. So why is the first thing that it comes to people's mind is you have to mentor people to bring them in. It's what you're saying, it's sponsorship. Like we know how to like maneuver this world that was not built for us to succeed. It's not really mentorship that we're missing. That is a helpful thing and that is key, but really what we need is sponsorship. And I think that's a discussion that I think I recently discovered. I didn't know what sponsorship was because it was never brought up to me. I just thought you just have to keep working and get acknowledged somehow, and then you'll eventually make it. But sponsorship could have been an easier route. Like maybe I didn't have to struggle to figure out how to get into this position. And I would really love to hear for other people, what do they think of sponsorship and what does that look like and what could it look like?
Right. I think so many times, and being in the IT field, and I've told people this before, like when there's just one other Black person in the room, it's 50-50 whether that will be an antagonistic relationship, another Black man, I'm sorry, because we've been given this mentality of scarcity, like there's only one room for one of us. And so I've had people sabotage me. I had people like intentionally, lie on me on a job position because they were afraid of, I guess, me taking their limelight. Because again, there's this mentality of scarcity because, you normally only see one more of us. And like you said, sponsorship becomes a place where you are ready to put your there's a word, I'm sorry, your reputation on the line on behalf of another. And because of that mentality of scarcity, we don't see that so much. We'll say, okay, yeah, I'll get you over to so and so. You never say, okay, well, you know what? Let me get in a position where I can hire and then hire, you know? So I think we need to move beyond being afraid to be in these spaces. We know we belong there. We've shown we belong there. Day in, day out, time and time again. This is a public display of our excellence. And, you know, we can't tolerate people saying, oh, well, you know, we might have to help them. Like you said, we don't need mentorship. We need sponsorship from our accomplices as well as from ourselves.
Yeah, being afraid to actually put yourself out there and take chances. While we have, there are so many things that are beyond our control, right? But we as a people don't necessarily always take advantage of the things that are within our control, and a lot of that has to do with that whole, you know, the imposter syndrome, and believing that you're not good enough to do something because you don't see it elsewhere. And part of making the change is to actually, like people on this panel and others, to actually get out there so that you can be seen actually doing what other people think is, you know, smoke and mirrors, lifting the veil so that they realize that right now, I think there's a lot of, there are people that look at me and think that I'm an exception to the rule because of what I do and how long I've been doing it, but they don't know the story. I used to tease my mother and say, you know, you were gambling with names with her 5 kids, because she named me Lance. Then she named they're gonna kill me for doing this, but she named me Lance. Then my sister under me is Kenya. And then after her is Kelly. And then after her it's Ebony. And then after her it's Tia. I said, oh, you were just like, one of my kids is going to do good and not have to deal with, you know, just the biases that come with the names. And I can personally testify to the fact that there are many opportunities and doors that I've walked through because they never laid eyes on me, because they never heard me speak. What they saw was my name come across in an email or a response to an RFP. And when you see Lance Gowdy, you don't see this face. When you see that name, you don't see this face. So I've had the fortune of actually letting my work speak for itself before you ever laid eyes on me. I remember the first time that Bishop Jakes and I actually met face to face. I had already been doing work with the ministry for about maybe 2 years or so. And when we finally met, he goes, oh, you're a brother. Didn't see it coming at all. So I may be, you know, an exception to the rule to someone else, but we need to empower people and get them to understand that, you know, they have just, I'm no smarter than, you know, anyone else on this panel. And I'm no smarter than the person standing next to me, except that I had the tenacity to actually push through.
I want to touch on that whole exception part. You know, a lot of white people will say, I have Black friends, and still not realize that when they have this Black person that they've become friends with or know as an acquaintance, because they've probably not had these kind of conversations with them, they don't see them. They say it out loud. I don't see you as Black. So basically what they're saying is you're an exception to the rule that I have in my mind of what Black people are.
Right.
I've told this story before. I had a vision impaired classmate, and I was on campus for early for the minority orientation, and he was there to help train his dog on the campus and the routes he'll be taking. And so we got into a discussion and talked about everything, excited about starting at Williams and all of that. And, you know, he asked, oh, why are you here? And I told him I was here for the minority orientation. And he said, later he came to me, he said, I asked my mom, why is Michael going to the minority orientation? And she told me that you're Black. I'm like, yep. And he's like, I couldn't even tell that. He was basically saying you don't sound or talk Black. And he's no longer with us. And at the time, I didn't like see it that way. I was like, oh, isn't that great? He he thinks I'm not, he thinks. But like later on, it came back to me. I'm like, well, man, that was I should have like talk jive like I pitied a fool. It's like I don't know what he expected me to sound like or act like, but yeah, that was interesting.
I'm curious what you guys think about this generationally, because there's a difference, right? And talk about expectations. What is, Mike, that you had room to even just think, oh, maybe that was a compliment, like, okay, and carry yourself accordingly. Like, generationally, we didn't have as many, well, I'll speak for me, like, same, Frank, I'm a kid of the 70s, 80s, 90s, really. I don't remember the 70s. And there weren't a whole lot of examples, certainly not in corporate spaces, right? In order to get into the corporate spaces and stay there, you're playing by the rules. You're code switching, you're wearing the clothes, you're compartmentalizing those parts of your identity. You cast your eyes away at the same time they do instead of calling you Black, right? Like that, there wasn't room to say, oh, wait a minute, this is a microaggression. I don't even think I had the language of microaggressions until I was out of college, maybe.
Right.
So the ability to even process what it's like to support the others, to be the plug, right? It's just radically different. The idea that you are allowed to bring your whole self to work is a new concept, and I'm curious if you guys feel like there's even room, like, to say, maybe I didn't want to do that. Maybe it was safer for me to hold parts of myself back, because that, just because I bring them to work doesn't mean they're really going to be respected. It's actually, I work in a position where, in editorial, you are encouraged to bring your passion to work with you, right? Because your passion generally dictates what books you acquire, what projects you get to work on, right? And for an editor to be passionate about this project, that makes everybody else passionate, gets you on board, allows you to acquire, gets your sales, publicity, marketing people on it with you. But when you are told that the things that you are passionate for are niche, when that's your whole culture, like, I grew up with hip hop, that's my world. For me to be told that, oh, Nas is niche, so you can't work on that, then why am I going to come and bring all of me here? You're not going to be able to hold that. But now that's not only the cry for especially the younger generation, now that our spaces are embarrassed about how non-diverse they are, right? So there's a lot of hiring initiatives to bring in younger employees, especially POC, and their expectation is just very different. Why would you not, bring all of you here? And I get that, and you want to support that and you want to sponsor that. But at what peril? Like, I'm curious if anybody else is feeling that conflict.
Oh yeah, I've put up with a ton of stuff in the interest of staying employed, basically. Being quiet and accepting, all kinds of things just so that I didn't want to stand out. It's like, I'll share this one story where we were on a project and working in a conference room all together in a team, like 9 people, 24, like everyone was waiting to be didn't want to be the first to go home. So we'd be there until 2, 3 in the morning, not really doing, like, not making progress. But so one of the team members started playing Get a Boys, Damn It's Good to Be a Gangster. And so, the unedited version has certain words that it's like, okay, I don't want to be listening to this in this company. But I was afraid to say it. And then a Black coworker came in and heard the song being played and looked at me, and I never felt so ashamed of myself, because I was afraid to rock the boat in any way. I was afraid to go against this grain, and it was, like I said, it was a very shameful moment for me.
So looking at that from two perspectives, really quick. One, within our generation, we've put up with that. The next generation is sort of encouraged to bring it, but then they hit the wall that the executives at our level and others are like, all right, you brought it. All right, whatever. Catch you later, right? Right? And they're going to begin to get desensitized because they're getting this sort of duality of message publicly, in a very facile way, supporting it. Yes, bring it. We want to hear it. But then, just putting it in a corner and ignoring it, right? And if we, one of the talks at the keynote, he was talking about financial independence, right? And we have to figure out how to empower ourselves, right? I actually left my role as head of technology in Planned Parenthood because I left without another job, and I left in protest because of how we were moving forward telemedicine and how it had to be high definition video, and how we were not thinking about the digital divide. We were not thinking about our core support base. The people that were building it weren't, and I was empowered to be able to say no. I was empowered to say no, and I was empowered to say, you know what? I may have what may be to me like the greatest career in my life, the greatest job in my life, running technology for Planned Parenthood, freaking awesome. But I'm stepping away from this because y'all are doing it wrong. Y'all are not empowering me. Y'all are not empowering our people. These are the people we're supposed to serve. So it's hard, right? If we can put ourselves in a position to be empowered to take a stand and be able to say, you know what, this may be my dream job, but I'm walking away. We have to understand what that point is, because if we don't take a stand, then those of us behind us are going to get caught up in the same system eventually. Even though there's like this flash right now of supportiveness, it can still be very superficial because the old structures are still in place. And unless we step up against them as the older generation, then the younger generation may get desensitized and may wind up being in the same place again.
I do have to say, I think out of this group, I am the younger generation you're talking about. And I do not feel like I can bring my full self to work. Like, I don't feel like I bring my full self really anywhere unless it's family and friends that have turned into family. I thought I wasn't code switching anymore, but I realized the other day hanging out with my brother, I code switch because the way I talk to my brother and my friends, and quite frankly, just Black people, is not the same way I talk around other groups and other places that I'm in. And while it seems like we're pushing and we want to have all of these things and we're demanding them, we're not getting them. The same frustrations that you all are talking about are the same things that I feel. I don't feel like I can speak up all the time at work. I do. A lot of the times I do speak up, and I've had really bad experiences because of that. I can say I've lost a job because of it, but the same things are happening. We're feeling the same way. So I don't know if there really is a big difference between the different generations.
For those who haven't heard it, there's an awesome Muhammad Ali quote about that. He talks about how, you told my grandparents, next generation is going to have it, you just wait your turn. My parents heard that. I heard that. No more, man.
Mike, I see a question here. I don't know if we want to introduce that now or later. It's a pretty good question. I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, let's go with it.
Okay, yeah, we could go with that, or I want to touch on how we're holding ourselves back as well.
Oh, sure, yeah, for sure.
So, Danny again gave an amazing opening keynote, and one of the things he touched on is how when you're successful, you're going to have haters.
Oh, for sure.
And yeah, it's true. On this conference, there have been people giving feedback that it's easy to criticize when you're not putting yourself on the line. I'm putting my heart out here, and I might not be doing it perfectly, but I'm trying my best and I'm doing something.
Doing something, exactly. Right.
Talking about people.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of us have been exposed to that in some way or another, and I just want to go around and ask, how do you deal with that? How do you not let that contribute to your own imposter syndrome? Imposter syndromes, and how do you avoid being a hater for yourself? Doubting yourself and saying you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, and moving beyond that, and letting giving yourself this space.
I don't know if you want me to touch that. Go, Portia, you guys are on mute. Valerie, you have something to say?
Yeah, I think for me, I gave a whole talk about it, so I'm ready to talk about it some more. I think for me, the way that I overcome that is just realizing I need to be self-aware and just take a moment to just say, what am I feeling? What's going on? What's around me? And just really understanding, why am I starting to doubt myself? Is it because of what this person is saying? Is it true? Am I letting my ego get in the way? Am I holding on to something that I shouldn't hold on to? Is it something I can improve on? How so? And I think I just basically handle it as if I am getting an art critique. I also studied art when I was in college, so I got my art ripped apart daily, it felt like. And my first semester doing that, I was so defensive. My art, it was stagnant. Like, I was drawing and painting the exact same things and not getting really good grades because of it. And when I sat down and I went to art critique and I brought out my notebook and I started taking notes and saying, okay, this is what's wrong. This is why it's not good. There's not enough depth. I'm not blending. I'm not doing this. And I went back and I started working on those things. I realized, okay, I removed my ego. I'm able. Wait. I removed my ego, and I'm able to just focus on what's going on. I'm done. I'm gonna pass.
He has something to say. He wants his time too. I'll tell you. I can give you a very short story. I used to dumb myself down for the sake of pleasing others, and I was that kid in school that I never really struggled. But it wasn't until I got into high school that I really applied myself, and I lost a lot of friends because of that. But I looked around. I grew up in the projects. I looked around me, and I came from a family, like we weren't filthy rich. We're nowhere close to it. I dare not say that we were poor, because they were people that were far worse off than we were. But we didn't have a lot, and I didn't realize that until I got much older. And I said, I want something better for myself. I want something better for my family. And it was at that point where I lost a lot of friends. And when I went off to school, after I graduated, rather, and I got my first job, I found I'm the only person that looked like me in a room of, at the time, it was just 4 people. It was a startup. And I was really surprised that I was hired. And I gained a lot of confidence, because I'm looking at people that don't look like me, but they were accepting of me. And it was actually in Chicago. And so I was a little surprised by that. Fast forward years later, I'm one of, I couldn't tell you how many engineers, maybe 40 or 50 in a company. And I'm the only one that looks like me. And at that particular point, there was an expectation that I couldn't do things. I couldn't be as good as anyone else. And so after hearing that over and over again and being bypassed, I started to really drink the Kool-Aid, and I felt like, okay, yeah, maybe I can't do that. I'm not that good. And here's what turned it around for me. I noticed that when we had meetings, I'd sit on one side of the table with my team, and there were probably at least 8 or 9 of us, and I'm the only Black person there. we would host a vendor that would come in, and on several occasions, it was almost like looking across in a mirror because it was the same type of representation on the other side, mostly white and maybe one or two black people. On one particular instance, or visit of a vendor, when it was over, we were walking out the room, and he hung back and he said, "Let me ask you a question." I said, "What's up?" He goes, "How does it feel?" "How does what feel?" He goes, "How does it feel when everyone on my team was looking to you to actually answer the questions?" And that was mind blowing to me because I had seen that, had always felt it, experienced it rather, but always thought that my mind was playing tricks on me, or I was imagining things. And he explained something to me. And it was the first time I heard this, and that, well, if you're black and you're in an all white environment, then, and I'm paraphrasing here, he's like, you must be bad. You must be the man, and you must be the guy in charge. Now, I couldn't understand that. But then he said, well, I don't know if you noticed this, but your team did the same exact thing. Whenever they asked a question, it didn't matter who was sitting on the other side, they all went to me. And I started asking around to see if other people experienced this as well. And come to find out that they didn't realize it at the time, but sure enough, they experienced the same thing. I don't know what that's called and what it is, but that was a turning point for me when I said, okay, I'm not going to dumb myself down, for anyone, any again. And primarily because I knew I had the right tools. My skin color has always been a barrier, but my skill set has always seemed to kind of rise to the top when I'm given the chance. And I'm all about, and that's what No Excuse is all about, is really bringing awareness to not just kids, but adults alike, that are struggling in the space and don't know how to step up and don't know how to actually speak for themselves and how to have the conversations when you're turning your head away because people are addressing you in a certain manner and it makes you feel uncomfortable. I've been in situations where I had a white person actually call me into an office to sit down and to ask me what it was like to actually grow up in a hood, and I found that to be very offensive at first. And then as I started talking about it, I looked in her eyes and I said, wow, she is really curious about this. And we went on to talk more. And then, believe it or not, that became almost, I'll say, like a discussion that we had every other week with other blacks and other whites sitting down. And our dialogue changed. We no longer had to be afraid about the type of music that we played in front of one another, the way we actually spoke. And so I said all of that to say that if we ourselves have a more inclusive mentality and take the time to sit down, especially in this time right now, we need to take advantage of ears that are open, and we need to really just drive the point home of where we're coming from. But we have to be careful. You have to be careful, and because you don't want to sound like all you're doing is complaining, and you don't want to talk their ear off. You don't want to preach to them. You want to express where you've come from, but you want to also express where you're trying to go and how they can get there, how they can help you get there.
Oh, yeah, all of that, Lance, all of that. I'm going to give everyone a chance to riff on this really shortly, and then we'll move on to our next topic. Frank, anything?
I'm good. Keep going, y'all.
Okay, we'll go on. The next topic, someone asked about cultural fit. Often determines who gets jobs in tech. Do tech companies put a higher emphasis on cultural fit than others? I will keep my thoughts brief on this. Interviewing.
Can I just start with the others?
Oh, okay.
And that's Justin. I don't know. We definitely do. And again, in a space that is very liberal and that does, especially in this moment, celebrate, talk about diversity of voices, right? Like I've edited and worked with some of the most prolific writers in our time and elder times. But if I didn't play the game, if I didn't code switch, like most of my time at my company, I was directly the assistant to the president of the company, right? So I had to, in order to occupy that space, in order to be on a phone call with Dr. Angelo, I had to be the right fit. And any part of myself that I felt might not fit, as I got those signals across the board, then I just muted that. And I wish that, you know, across the board, I could have been a more courageous person to not respond to, you know, displeasure in that way of making myself smaller. But I can see, like, even now, even with hiring diversity initiatives, someone being the right fit for this team, the right fit to work in, you know, a publicity department that's so dynamic and everybody's so tight together, especially like open office spaces, right? Like, fit is still a barometer and we're trying to cross it, but yeah, it still matters. So how does tech compare?
Okay, so my thoughts on cultural fit in technology. When the room, when the interviewers, when the people evaluating cultural fit have no experience in human resources or psychology, and they're saying, do you fit, does this person who doesn't resemble the rest of the room, I didn't finish my degree, so I'm fighting against people who have advanced computer science knowledge that I have, but isn't in the front of my mind. So a lot of big tech companies are bringing in fresh recruits, and they set up their interview processes to vet people with no experience. So when I come to them with 20 years experience, 25 years of experience, they don't know how to process that, especially when I don't have the CS background to support it. And so I get evaluated as if all of this is fresh in my mind. And, you know, you never know when these questions are being asked, when, you know, this gatekeeping happens, like, oh, can you solve this problem? Can you solve that problem? Because I didn't think of the solution that they had in mind, but I solved it on a whiteboard. You know, when normally I'm programming, I have Google, I have a compiler that auto completes my expressions. I have a whiteboard coding test has nothing to do with my day-to-day job. 15 minutes on the spot, solve this problem you've never seen. That's nothing like development at all. And this is how they're evaluating, and then adding on, hey, can I have a beer with this guy? That's their cultural fit. So it's inherently biased, as long, you know, because there's already implicit bias there, you know. It's like, so yeah, the cultural fit thing, it's there, and it shouldn't be.
So this is
Or
actually
done in a way that is actually backed by HR professionals making that decision, and other methods that have been put in place to evaluate, hey, where can this square peg fit into this hole? You know, because there are holes for the square peg in the team, you know, and if you're saying, oh, the square peg, you know, all of us are round holes, so he doesn't fit.
so this actually this is a bit of a problem in the tech world. A lot of the tech world, a lot of the leaders, a lot of the CEOs in the tech world, they often follow similar things, right? And Peter Drucker and Peter Drucker's management style is like a big thing in the tech world. And Peter Drucker, you know, talks about how culture eats strategy, and how you have to build a culture so that you can execute on the strategy that you're trying to execute. And fundamentally, you know, the core principle of that is true and is very important. However, it's insidious, right? It's extremely insidious in that it has this, implicit bias, implicit racism in it. That, you know, if you're not part of our culture, if you rock the boat or anything like that, you're rocking the organization. You shouldn't be part of the organization. So even though, you know, there is this thought going out in the tech world tech worlds, you know, think heavily, you know, follow heavily stuff like Peter Drucker. And, you know, so that concept is there. That concept is strong. And that concept is not challenged with what is the implicit bias within that. So you're actually making things work when you know, you're of good intention, you're trying to do good things, but you're actually making things worse because you don't understand it. One of the things that I like to say, you know, at Planned Parenthood, and when I would go to the tech world and try to talk to people about sexism, and I talk about implicit bias and people, you know, what is implicit bias, this, that, and the other. I talk about, you know, even a small thing that you wouldn't even realize, right? When you look at most public bathrooms, and this is not Planned Parenthood, this is just me and what I remembered. When you look at most bathrooms, you know, United States has a sordid history of bathrooms, race-based, you know, transgender, sordid history. Just think about this, even beyond the sordid history. When you look at most public bathrooms, when you're forward-facing to a public bathroom, where is the men's bathroom? Where's the women's bathroom? I tallied it up for a year, and I found more than 80% the men are on the right and the women are on the left. We are a right-dominant society. They don't teach you in architectural school, men's bathrooms go on the right, women's bathrooms go on the left, right? And if you take a child, they're naturally going to go to the direction of where they're hand dominant. So our society has taught women to go against where they would naturally turn and turn in the other direction. It's like a small thing, right? But this is implicit bias that sits in everything. And unless we're actually looking at this stuff, you know, Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy, hell yeah. And now guess what? You're a monochromatic culture. You're an all-white culture, and you're gonna die because you're a monochromatic culture, right? You've got to understand all the layers, everything involved, and you've got to really inspect it, and you've got to be extremely critical. And I think, you know, we like to talk about critical thought a lot, but in our desire at, you know, the culture of this nation, the desire to sort of innovate fast and move quick and this, that, and the other, you know, the space it's talked about, but the space off isn't made for that. So, you know, when we talk about that, I went on a little long there, my bad about that. But when the culture piece, it absolutely is there. Don't feel like it's not. It absolutely is there in the tech world. Call it out, work against it. When the Demore letter came out, when I was talking to Salesforce, when I was talking to Microsoft, when I went out to Seattle and San Francisco, I was talking about, what are you doing about this? Don't tell me that it's great that you are, you know, funding, you know, Black Girls Code, you know, Girls Who Code, things like that. That's great, but that's nothing, right? What are you doing holistically, not only externally, but internally? You always like to say, hey, you know, we're doing this, and that's outside of us. That you're not looking inside and seeing what are the structural issues you have inside that are actually causing this to begin with. I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna go, because 7 years of my career, I managed technology for a K-12 organization. And there was a question about, you know, can you discuss what you think of the immediate changes in the next few months in tech, in secondary tech education spaces, and primary and secondary tech education spaces. With COVID, the tech sector, the education sector and the healthcare sector are going to be disrupted massively, massively. And we saw, when we had to teach our youth remotely, we saw that one of the things I fought at Planned Parenthood, you know, I had some of the leaders tell me digital divide doesn't exist anymore. Everyone has a phone in their hand. I'm like, so you're doing high definition video when people have maybe 500 meg data plans, and the digital divide doesn't exist anymore. You're excluding without even understanding that you're excluding, right? When COVID happened, you know, and New York City had to do, you know, everyone learn remote, you know, yeah, maybe they had an internet connection at home, but they have one device for 5 kids. How they gonna learn, right? That's the digital divide. Now we're seeing all this, right? The tech sector and the tech ed sector, both primary and secondary, is going to be disrupted massively. And we're gonna need to start looking at, much like we talk about in AI, because it's a big thing, right? But implicit bias in AI and what that means, the implicit bias within the education sector, the fact of the digital divide and what it means, and how that impacts us there. How that impact, you know, these are all social determinants of health. The society is moving into the information age and away from the industrial age. And we're getting even more left behind in this process. You know, if we can't go to a doctor and we're supposed to, you know, have some sort of high-speed connection to the doctor, who's going to make sure we got that to be able to get what we need, right? We need our folks, we need our people to come into the ed sector and work tech ed. We need our people to come into the healthcare space and work healthcare tech, right? The tech industry is great. Don't get me wrong. It's great to work in the tech industry. But if you can find those projects that you can do more for our people in those other areas, that need is there. And that need is exacerbated. COVID showed it. You know, let's figure out, you know, telehealth is but the tip of the iceberg. For me, really where tech is headed to a place where tech is managing complexity. Tech is all about managing complexity. You're going to atomize everything as much as possible, and then you're going to look at all the variables across that atomization and figure out, okay, what is the right solution when you atomize it at that level? And we need people to be able to come in there and say, if you atomize it at that level, here's what we know about our experiences, our lived experiences, and how this impacts our lived experiences so that our people can benefit from this.
Well said.
Yeah, well said, Frank. We definitely need to address a new reality in terms of tech and education and tech and health and how we can stop. I think the problem is we still have this, like you said, industrial age mindset, and that's coming from the existing leaders of the industries. You know, as the topsoil is turned over and new growth happens, we'll have new things happening. But right now we're way behind. The fact that, you know, there was never a burden, a legitimate reason why people had to work in offices, and COVID has exposed that tremendously. You know, it's the industrial mindset of command and control, where if I can't see you sitting at your desk and working and look over your shoulder, then you're not actually going to work. You know, just and in an age of information workers who need that time to let their brain spill out for a moment and stop looking at this one problem and need to walk around and let it breathe. You know, like you're afraid to look at Facebook for 5 minutes because someone's going to come. You don't know when they'll come over your shoulder and say, "Oh, all he does is look at Facebook all day." It's like, no, it's just I took a break. People do that. You know, when people are smoking, you know, for their 15-minute breaks, you don't come over and say, "Oh, all he does is smoke all day." You know, it's like, so I'm still at the computer. I'm still doing my work. I just need to get that from in front of my eyeballs for a second. So, you know, COVID exposed that as a lie, you know, and it exposed so many things. Like, we're wasting so much time commuting. Property values are going down. Property prices are going down in the tech hubs around America. That is still $3,500 in San Francisco for a one-bedroom apartment is pretty not impressive, but it was a 10% drop, you know, and it's going to keep going down because people are going to be able to work from wherever they want to, like it should have been. You know, we've got more and more companies saying, "Hey, we're going to keep allowing telework," you know, and what happens with all these, like you said, what happens with all these offices that are built there to bring people together and corral them, and then you put them in open spaces so that you can save money on your offices. You know, now you don't even need the office. You know, I can work from Acapulco if I want to, as long as I get my work done, right? But that's what COVID has exposed, and we need to start accepting the reality and getting out of the industrial mindset. Just like the industrial age broke how the agricultural mindset. Now we're in the information age, and the dinosaurs need to adapt where they're going to be hit by a meteor.
Mm. This past December, I'm from New York, and I went home to spend time with my family. And before I got there, I sent a message out to my nieces and nephews. And I said, when I get there, I want everyone to grab their laptop, and we're going to meet at Mom's house. And my goal was to really kind of influence as much as I could that younger generation behind me, to really get off of the phones, I like social media, I'll say as much as the next person, but that's not true. I just did my Twitter account today because of the conference. So I'm in there, but I really wanted to enlighten them and show them that there are other options out there where they have choices. They can make good career choices. Not to say that careers outside of tech are bad. That isn't it. It's what I do. So, I preach what I know about. And I looked at that and hoped that it would be, a model that others can actually follow. Because we talk so much about what needs to be done and ask the question, what can we do or what can others actually do? So while there is a fight outside of the home for social justice and reform and things of that nature, what happens when those systems are corrected? Will we be actually ready to take advantage of that? And unless we do something to change the mindset, especially the generation behind me, and even behind Valerie, unless we do something to change that mindset, it'll be the dog chasing its tail, where we have the opportunity to provide an out or to provide a way out. So while there's so much fighting going on outside the home, and there needs to be, justifiably so, we need to take a stand inside the home, I strongly believe, and we can't leave it up to the school system. I mean, everyone is homeschooling now, where a lot of people decided to homeschool before COVID. Now, people started doing it since COVID and so on. And as you mentioned, because of, the pandemic, we're doing things now that, in the tech sector, it's been to some degree, the norm, more norm than outside, where people can work from home or maybe 2 or 3 days a week and so on. And I know that's still a big fight for some people, but for those generations that are behind us, they need to see this. They need to see this conference. They need to see people that look like them and that are making a difference and making an impact. Because we don't know about this. We really don't know about it. And if we take the opportunity if we don't do anything else but look in our own peripheral and try to grab people, and even if they have no interest in coding or no interest in network security or anything else that we do in the technology sector, at the very least, in the process of trying to assimilate them, they actually see people that look like us. And if you don't know by now, I'm an advocate for just trying to help us help ourselves. Because when things are turning, they're changing. And when those doors open up, we have to be ready to run through them. And unfortunately, everyone's not there yet. I told myself I wasn't going to preach anymore. I'll put myself on mute right now. On mute.
No, I think what you're talking about is important and it's vital, especially being able to say that in your own home, you have that power to set that standard and be that model and express that to other people. And I think that's one thing that I try to do with the community work that I do, especially with Tech by Choice, is let people know, like, I'm here, I'm doing it, and look at all these other people who look like us or look like you that are doing it too. I think that's so important. And I think one thing that I see a lot of these communities doing is how they market and how they talk about their events. They talk to people who are always going to find out about tech. And that's such the wrong way to do that. That is the one way you can make sure that you're making enough money, making sure you have people to come and your numbers look really good, but are you really making the impact? Are you really reaching the people who will really benefit from this? And are you setting up your system so that you can reach those people? If you are building a community and all of your income and your revenue comes from the people paying for classes, are you really targeting the right market? Because if they can pay for your class, if they can do this, they could do that. They can also go to this boot camp that is not made for us. So who are you really marketing to? And I think once we can solve those problems and fix those systems, we'll be able to see more people looking like us and the people we grew up around entering in these places. And I think what we did with this conference, we're getting there. I invited people to join who don't know about tech, and they're now talking about machine learning. All it takes is just that one introduction, and you need to make it so that it's easy to participate and be involved, just the way that we did it. And I know most of you on here are doing work like this in other parts of your own community. So we just need to make sure that we hold everyone else to that same standard.
Yes, indeed. So, like I said, I've gotten so many people reaching out to me from this conference. Um, a Black woman in the UK reached out about her program that is focused on training and getting Black youth internships at big companies. And like you said, if we're not represented in these organizations, it's almost basically the white savior problem, right? It's people, you know, I've worked with these organizations, and you know, where I was a mentor for the students, and you know, I went to the mentor student meetup, and there weren't many looking like me there, but there were a lot of people looking at like me as the students. So it becomes a charity, right? They don't see it as uplifting the community. They don't care, you know, about the communities these students are coming from or going back to. They just want to have like these outcomes and like parade them around like they're pets, you know, they're rescue pets. You know, look, we got this young Black man a job at 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 Citibank or wherever. And I think, yeah, definitely we need to start moving into that space and providing representation and say, okay, thanks a lot, but we got this from here. Because the same connections that these organizations can make on their own, we can do it as well. We know people at Microsoft, we know people at Citibank, we know people at Planned Parenthood, we know people at at a book publishing firm that Portia works at. And we can get them in there, you know. And again, we need to stop selling that coding is the only way into a successful tech job, you know. So yeah, this platform, that's definitely a program we're looking into doing, is creating a funnel, changing that school to prison pipeline into a school to tech pipeline, and getting involved with them at an early age and saying, hey, you know what? Your only options aren't dealing drugs or going into rap or trying to get into the NFL or NBA. There are other opportunities there. And that's what they're being sold right now. That's all I heard when I was growing up. You know, no one said, "Hey, you know, you could be a you love computers. I see that. You could go into computers." You know, so it amazes me how much opportunity is here. We have a severe shortage of people qualified to do it. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about the how we set up our school systems, where if based on where you live, you're gonna be preordained to fail or preordained to pass, and that is one of the many scars that racism has given this country is that we fell way behind in academics and technology, and we let so many people fall into the cracks. And this isn't just affecting Black people, it's affecting poor white people. So again, whiteness has been a very effective tool at maintaining oppression, because you have people voting against their best interests. You're on welfare, but you're voting to cut welfare funds. What sense does that make? So that's why we need to break down. We need to address it. We need to uncover that flaw in our society and get rid of it.
No, I definitely agree with you, but I do think there are enough people out there already who have the skills that can do well, but we don't have the systems that support us entering. So for me, myself, I'm a self-taught developer. So when I was learning, I know how to execute and build programs that work in production. I didn't teach myself algorithms because you don't need to learn how to do algorithms to build these products. I was a front-end developer. I was mostly working with forms and making sure that validation works. You don't need an algorithm to do that as a junior front-end developer. That's not needed. But I struggled landing a few jobs when I first got started because I didn't know that. I didn't have that support. And I think, especially after working with the community, that's one of the biggest things. Like, we are teaching ourselves how to be job ready, but we don't have that same level of theory-based learning that people who have computer science degrees have. So when we go through the interview process in tech, it doesn't really work for us. We can teach ourselves, and I've seen people, and I've done it myself, learn how to get past these algorithm type questions to land a job. But the thing is, the hiring process in tech is broken. Like the question that came up about culture fit. For me, if the real big issue is culture fit, I don't want to work there, because that means the company doesn't really understand what the job entails. If I'm a senior front-end, a senior developer, my job, I should be a good communicator. I should be able to lead. I should be able to mentor. As a senior developer, as a lead on a team, that's my required roles. If I can't do those things, I'm not going to be a quote unquote culture fit. So if you're not checking for those things because that's covered in the role and the requirement, then what are you actually checking for? What is it? Because like it's not any of those things that would be required of the role. So I think if we can focus on finding ways to empower ourselves and others to learn, and let them know that, again, tech isn't just about coding. There are product developers, product managers, product designers, there are marketers, there's technical writers, there's all these different roles in tech that are tied to large salaries. But if we don't expose people to it, if we don't allow them to find these resources and find support systems that actually support them versus just parade them around to show them off so that they can get more grants, more donations, and all these other things, it's not going to work. So we need to really focus on empowering and fixing the systems.
Yes, thank you for saying, I think I owe everyone who said empower it like some kind of royalty. That's the theme of our conference, is empowered by tech, and this is how we can do it. People are saying that tech is the great equalizer, but we've got to get people in the door um, and benefiting from that equalization. And we got to get gatekeepers out of the way so that equality can happen. I'm calling on all of these large tech companies that have these like conglomerations of great tech minds. Hack your HR system, hack your hiring process, do it in a scientific manner, do blind tests, you know, have a study group, have a control group, and look at the results and reiterate on that. just like you would any other project. Because look, if we're still asking, is there a benefit to diversity? We've already showed it time and time again in this conference. You know, how about not getting sued for the bias of your algorithm, Apple? That's a benefit of diversity. If you had some people in there who paid attention to, oh, how is our machine learning influenced by the culture it's being trained in? It just starts by asking those questions. Not just how can we make it, how can we make it better? How can we make it more human? We're so focused on replacing thought with machines and replicating human intelligence with AI. Let's put some humanity back into it, and not the wrong kind, not the bias.
I would flip that a little bit, and I know you and me don't always see eye to eye on this, and I'm gonna call this out, and I'm gonna call it out in relation to the T-shirt that I'm wearing, right? In the K-12 space, successful educational organizations have found the use of positive reinforcement, right? You learn through positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement. You learn much more readily through positive reinforcement. We need some positive reinforcement into these systems, right? These systems, like Audre Lorde said, you can't take down the master's house with the master's tools, right? People of color have been stepped on. African Americans have been stepped on for hundreds of years, and this nation has built itself on them. This nation has stepped on women for hundreds of years and built itself on them. This nation has stepped especially on Black women for hundreds of years. And then you look at like the last election, the plurality of white women voted for Trump. When you look at people who are pulling their weight, it's Black women who are pulling their weight, and they get stepped on the most. When we put these algorithms in, we have to put weightings for the people that we have stepped on traditionally in society over time. You know, when we talk about, like was brought up in the question, Black Lives Matter started by Black women, right? We talk heavily, we talk a lot about Breonna Taylor, but we talk heavily about the men, right? And the men are off in the face and the women do the work, right? So when we're talking about tech companies and these systems that they're doing, they can't just, it's not like that image that shows like everyone's trying to look over the baseball fence and, one has 3 boxes, one has 2 boxes, one has 1 box, so they can all look over the fence. A whole bunch of us have been stepped on so systemically over so long that you got to do way more than that. You've got to build positive bias into the system until society is normed again.
Yeah, that's one part of our stated mission is to tip the scales, to tip the balance, so that against the biases that are already here. I talked about it in my closing notes. It's like we've got to account for the fact that though they're not only like outward bias, acknowledged biases that people have, they won't admit to it, but also to account for the biases they don't even know they have. So, tipping those scales happens in a number of ways, just like empowering people happens in a number of ways. So yes, definitely, and thank you for bringing that up. We can't say Black Lives Matter unless we say Black trans lives matter, unless we say Black women's lives matters, unless we say Black disabled minds matter. And I don't mean disabled as Black people with disabilities. If their lives don't matter, if the LGBT Black lives don't matter, David Porter called us out on this. It's horrible, and that's part of toxic masculinity on top of homophobia, and we need to stop that. Unless we can all come together and work together, we're not going to get anywhere. also, yeah. So unless we can't say all Black Lives Matter, unless we can say all of those other categories of Black Lives Matter. We talk about women's disparity in pay. When you look at women, it's, I think they said 80% to the dollar of white men. When you look at Black people, that drops down to 60% to the dollar. When you look at Black women, that drops under 40% to the 40 cents to the dollar. So they're making half double the disparity that white women receive. We have, I said it earlier, we have failed Black women as a Black community. We take the burdens that we have to deal with out in the white world and bring them home to our women. There's the saying is, a man's home is his castle. And people think that, oh, that means I'm the ruler. That means my word is law. What that means, a castle isn't just a place of rulership. A castle is a safe fortress where you go to retreat from the outside world. It's where you go to take off your armor and be vulnerable. And we need to start being vulnerable with our Black women and letting them know that they can be vulnerable with us. You say, oh, they're too hard. A myth. They're not too hard. They're what we make us. If you get kicked, if a dog gets kicked every time you walk around, they're going to be protective. And I'm not saying women are dogs, because that applies everywhere. If you feel like you're not safe, you're going to be defensive, and you're going to respond in kind to the energy that you give. So if you're saying, why are Black women so hard? It's because they have to be, because we don't let them be soft, and we need to fix that. Okay, y'all went silent on me. Okay, I guess we need to bring up another topic.
I'm looking through the questions from the audience here. Let's see if
I feel like we've been talking so much over the process of planning this. I'm surprised we can't come up with topics. I can't even think of anything right now myself.
Well, if you leave it up to me, we're going to be talking about how to actually fix it all day long. And I, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here. There's so much focus and attention right now on, obviously, the social injustice and COVID-19. I just don't want us to be blindsided while we're spending so much energy and so much focus over here on the left, that we neglect what's on the right. And what I'm referring to is, again, being ready. I have to believe, I choose to believe, that we are on the horizon of change. And I want to do everything that I can to kind of usher that in. But I am very concerned about being ready for that. It's like this conference, Michael. There are people that stepped up, that you reach out to, and then other people reached out to you about speaking. And for some people, it's an opportunity. And the big question here is, well, are you ready for that opportunity? Are you ready? There are so many people that are given the chance to do something, but because of fear, because of doubt, or just because of, and I'm sorry to call it this, laziness, or thinking that they can do it the way they've done things in the past and show up late all the time for something. And I'm not beating us, because and this is not a Black thing. This is just across the board. Being ready for opportunity, getting yourself prepared, so when that door opens, you can walk through it. Yes, we have a lot of challenges in front of us. There are systems that were built. I can't say that they're broken. They were built so they're working just fine. They're accomplishing what they were intended to actually do. So we talk about abolishment, all right? So those things need to be corrected. But what do we do once they are corrected? Because I'll tell you right now, when I give people the opportunity to speak on my platform or to do different things, or hire them, I'm expecting them to come through the door and perform and do what they said they were going to do. And if they don't do it, then I ask, what was all that for? What was all that noise for? Why did you even show up for the interview? Why did you walk through the door? So I said that to say that while we are very focused, as we should be, on the things that are happening around us, we need to prepare ourselves so that we can do better once the opportunity is there. Once we're given access to capital like everyone else, once we're given access, to homes and jobs, and that glass ceiling disappears, and we see the equality of pay for both men and women, no matter what color you are. Once that's there, and it may not get there tomorrow, I want to believe that we're on that path, we're on the way, but just be sure that we're ready when we get there.
All right. So I'm taking a look at some of the questions that are coming in the chat, and it reminded me of something. I try to, when I try to run technology at Planned Parenthood, I try to live by a couple of principles. Principles that I think are very important for our community. One principle we all know in the tech world, we all sort of like platitude in the tech world already, right? That's experience, right? Making sure that we connect with the experience of the people that we're trying to serve, right? That's one thing, right? Then there's access, and we talked about the digital divide a little bit. I'm not going to go into that. But, experience and the tech world, people think that's one and the same, right? Access in the tech world, maybe not. Tech is supposed to be, open the world to everyone. But, we know the dark side of that through the digital divide, right? And we know how that continues to striate. We know continued striation occurs because the haves can access the more sophisticated tech and get more value out of technology than the have-nots. So while on the outside, people may say access is, techs can break through and provide access to everyone, we know the reality there and have to fight that. Next up is privacy. Privacy is a critical thing. And there was a lot of chat about, now that we're going online with technology, what about educational surveillance? What about surveillance of our people? What about, our people now coming under a police state, around social norms, around how you're supposed to, what's behaviorally acceptable or not. And, we stepped it up by putting police in the schools to begin with, and now, criminalizing our youth. Now you've got the surveillance state that's now being able to be put across all over. It's something we have to be cognizant of. The technology world, when most people think of technology and privacy, they think it's antithetical. It's not antithetical. It is the business models that we've employed in the tech world that make technology and privacy antithetical. You look at, I know Microsoft is working on some things. I forgot the code name of it, but you can build technology to be private. That's just, it's not this, right? In the capital world, privacy doesn't bring money, right? And unless and until we can reverse that perverse incentive to sell away your soul, to enable, we talked about Orwell, right? In 1984, and everyone was like, oh, the police state is going to happen. The police state is going to happen. We didn't even know the police state happened because we gave them all the information. Like, I want to be on Facebook. Here, take this information. I want to, I want access to this. Take my information. Oh, we're on surveillance now. We didn't even know it. We just gave it up. They didn't like put cameras and was like, monitoring us. We gave them the ability to monitor us, right? And that is going to seep now into all these systems. Now that technology is becoming so core to our society, COVID, education, healthcare with technology, that's why we need our people in there, right? This stuff is going to significantly, if we're not going to be policing ourselves anymore in the streets, we're going to be policing ourselves in other ways. And we're going to continue to be held down in a whole lot of other ways unless we're seriously involved in this stuff, right? That's why we have to really change the structures and the systems and the narrative here. A lot of stuff is going on without us knowing about it. Remember when I talked about the bathroom and the men's and the women's. A lot of stuff is going on without us knowing about it, and it is compounding. And until we get our foot in the door, until we say, stop, no more of that, you know, we're not accepting of that anymore. We as a people know what's going to happen to our people if we continue to head down this path. Then, you know, we need to start taking stands. We're taking stands on the street, which is good. We need to start understanding. We need to start educating ourselves more and more about really what's going on and what's happening to us. You know, not this, hey, someone's going to put a microchip in your brain sort of stuff, and 5G is taking over your life sort of conspiracy theory stuff, right? But real stuff is going on that seems like that conspiracy theory stuff. It's really just systemic stuff that's going on without us noticing it. And when you deal with tech's perverse incentive to sell privacy for money, and then you marry that to the educational sector, when you marry that to the healthcare sector, when you marry that to civil society and civil society taking on technology, that's a huge issue. And we need to be the canaries in the coal mine and say, no, we can't let that happen. We have to get in there and we got to do it right.
Oh my God. So yeah, being in tech and working across so many organizations and so many industries, I just try to like let all of that spill out of my brains, because it's like MIB, if you knew what I knew, you know, there was always a Carillion invasion about to happen. I don't know. How do you fight that? I don't know. I have no idea. But what you need to know is that, yeah, we're giving away our privacy. You know, we sold our information to find out what kind of Barbie doll we are. You know, and all the while we find out later, oh, this was a Russian company that was collecting information. You know, it's like Facebook is a targeted marketing system. I can go in right now and make a Facebook ad targeted by income, by location, by what you click like on. You like Sade's original album. I can target you directly. That's what they've been looking for since the beginning of the internet. I worked at a video streaming company that was like, hey, we can insert ads, and the ads can be more targeted than what you buy. Oh, it's more targeted than just buying ads based on BET. It's more targeted than buying uh, ads based after Murder She Wrote. I can like track down what they've been doing on the internet and what they're interested in, and in the middle of a video stream, give you a targeted ad. In the middle of internet radio stream, let you sell ad space at a more premium price. And that's Facebook is the culmination of that. I stopped using it a couple of weeks back and moved to Twitter. And these conversations, I've like been engaged in so many conversations and met so many people just by shifting off of that platform. I'm not saying Twitter is a saint, but at least they're not saying we're going to not block known lies because, you know, it's the president, and that might be against the citizens' right. That doesn't even make sense on any level. You know, I'm going to let him lie because he's a politician, and it's up to the citizen to determine if it's a lie in the interest of civil debate. So yeah, we've already fully accepted the police state. I can tell you how when you're driving on a highway, you're being tracked by your Bluetooth. It's for congestion measurement, supposedly, or ostensibly. But then what happens when, like this biker who had his GPS turned on his Android phone, was caught in a digital dragnet, where they said, hey, you were in the area of this crime at the same time it happened, so you're under arrest.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
yeah, you know, people are saying, oh, they're going to inject microchips in you. under the pretense of a COVID virus. They don't need to. They don't need to. You
Exactly.
already voluntarily carry this around all day and put all your information into it all day. They sold it as a thing you want to do, but like they have like people blog and journal into Facebook all of their thoughts that you wouldn't say to people in front of you, but you're putting it up on this public platform and then worried about an injection. I don't know.
No, I think all of that is true, but the reason why we understand this is because we work in a space. We, like you're saying, you've worked at all these different companies throughout all these different industries, and so this knowledge for you was at reach. But I think the issue that we're running into now is how do we spread that message for people who aren't right there in those companies that are doing that are making unethical tech? Like, how do we spread that message in a way that is tangible to people who don't care about coding, don't care about how something's built? I think that's what we need to work on. I know that, at least for me, and with the curriculum and the content that I'm trying to put out there with Tech by Choice, I'm always trying to say, like, okay, what is the thing that is happening the most often currently, and who can I get to come out and speak about it that's knowledgeable and that looks like people from my community? So that way the message is spread and they can see themselves doing that exact same thing. Like earlier when COVID first started happening, I realized there was more and more cybersecurity things that were going on. I was getting spam, I was getting phone calls about all of this stuff about COVID, and I'm really good at filtering that out. But then I almost got caught up in one of those scams. So I said, well, you know what, if I'm getting caught up on this, I need to help spread the message. So I found someone to come out and speak about those things. And I think if we think about things those way, and that way, we can spread this message further, reach more people, and then it's going to change what the landscape looks like. It's no longer going to be like these were the people who are making the decisions and building the tech and driving the change. It's going to be the people who, by history, were the ones harmed by it, who will now be in control because now they have a better understanding of what's going on, so it's an even playing field. And I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of, that even playing field, because once that happens, everything is going to flip. And I think we're in a very pivotal moment right now that we can make that change happen. We just need to make sure that we're investing and doing the right thing for the community so that that flip can happen, and we need to make sure it happens for our benefit.
Well, you just make me understand.
History.
Yeah, back on the how do we get the message out? Scott Hanselman said it best. If you're not paying for a service, you are the service. So that's the thing. Like I said, we're Facebook is a marketing engine with Twitter as well. Those like Medium, you're putting your content up there, and they get to put advertisements on it. So if you're not paying for it, you are the product.
There's an action item that came out of this for me. Valerie, I feel like you just spanked me on the hand because I feel convicted when you talk about, educating people and letting people know. You're exactly right. I have to give a security awareness training every quarter. And, I'm doing that because I need to do it internally for staff. But there's no reason why the same thing can't happen on another level where we, like on a platform like this, we're educating people. I remember the first time I took somebody's cell phone on staff, and I told them everywhere they had been over the last 72 hours just by looking at their cell phone. And they were completely shocked that I was able to do that. And it dawned on me that while this is common knowledge to me, it's not so, and it's common to me because I live in this space, but it's not so common to most people that are out there. So one of the takeaways for this, I think, is to actually create that platform where it's not propaganda and people don't look at it that way. Is that we're just trying to educate people, because how many people look at the privacy statement before they say, I'm going to agree, to all of this. They just want to get to the tech and never mind, all of the, the residuals that come along with that. So that's what I'm going to do. Right? I've been spanked. I feel convicted, and I'm going to do it. So who wants to join me? We'll get this done.
So following up on that question that I was partially answering, but not fully answering, what actionable things do you all hope to see happen before autumn and our kids go back to remote school, keeping in mind things like the New York City Department of Education has cut funding by almost $1 billion, for example. So I saw a meme recently, which was awesome. And it said, we are not just getting out of this, Aunt Jemima getting off the label, and Juneteenth is a day off. We are getting out of this restructuring healthcare, restructuring civil society. We're getting out of this restructuring civil society. Defund the police, which we talked a little bit about, in our first conversation, is about restructuring civil society, putting our money where our mouth is. So the three actionable things I hope to see fall into three core buckets, right? Education, Valerie brought up, is one of the key ones, right? We all need to be educated about this stuff, right? What really made up the master's house here? And how do we really begin to take this apart and build a new and better house, right? So that education piece has got to be key. We have to hold ourselves accountable to educating our people and to educating others. I think that's a critical thing that needs to happen. We need intentionality. We have to continue being intentional about this. We need to carry that forward, that intentionality of this is what we are doing. This is even if we have a day job and we're doing other things, this is what we are doing. We are being intentional about this, right? This is not just, some DEI class and then, that's it, we're done, we good, that's it, right? We have to be intentional about actually revising the system. So we have to carry that intentionality forward, right? And then the last piece is really now, how do you do the empowerment piece? So you've got the education, you've got the intent, and now how do you actually empower? You can't use the master's tools. How do you actually empower to break down the house and build a new house that is truly more equitable, right? So how do we now say, you know what, we're not just going to defund the police, we're not just going to come up with a new way of policing, we're going to think about all of the social determinants of health, everything that goes into what is actually going on, and figure out how we address all of that effectively. We're going to go back, and when we say, as we're preparing to go back to school, and if school may be digital, or if we're going to go to school or not, how are we putting people who know in the position to say, here is what that impact is, and here's what this has to be done. It can't be the people that have been doing it all along, because we've been doing it wrong. We have to empower the ability to actually change the structure. I want to see Mayor de Blasio put a panel in each of the different areas, almost like an Office of Civil Rights, right? In the Department of Education, to say, if we're going back to school, here are all the structures we need to think about. Here are all the things we need to think about. And here's the level of investment we need to make to actually fix this. And here's what we actually need to do to fix this. And they need to be empowered to do this, right? The New York City Police Department had the Civilian Complaint Review Board. They were powerless. They were powerless, absolutely powerless. Nothing happened. CCRB has been there since I know since the 90s, right? And look at where we are right now. Not empowered. We have to empower the structures to begin to dismantle these structures properly. So what I want to see when it's on the other end of this movement is I want to see the empowerment of the structures that will begin to reconstitute our society.
Definitely.
Okay, so we're coming into the final leg of our town hall part 2. I see a question. What is the fix for pay equity? Let's do a quick round the table. Just one statement. What do you believe the fix is? I'll go first and say that the fix is to have standardized pay grades like the Army does. If you are like in Microsoft, if you're a rank uh, a senior software engineer, everyone gets that pay for a location. That takes away the um, the how good are you negotiating. If someone deserves a higher salary, then that means they should have a higher rank, and then that's one less variable about how equity is dealt with. Then we just look at, okay, how are we dealing with who gets into what position? Uh, Anyone else can chime in on that?
I think we just need to ask for more money and, well, no, don't ask. Put yourself in a position where you feel that you can demand more money because you deserve it. There's no job that can pay anyone their actual worth because that number it's nothing we can imagine. But you can demand to have enough money to take care of the time that you spent at a company. So that's how I frame it for myself so that I feel okay with negotiating. And I think we just need to make that normal. And on top of a long list of other things that companies can do to make the system correct. But for yourself, that's what you can do.
I so agree with that, Valerie. That was so beautifully stated that outside of, sure, I work on a particular task force in my company to think about equity and career growth, right? But there are so many, I work in such a subjective industry that disparities are almost the norm, right? Because for a whole bunch of reasons. But what you can do is advocate for yourself in a way. The savvier we get with education, understanding what and being able to speak the language of career development, right? Being able to itemize these are the on paper contributions, understanding language, like this is the business case for my promotion, for my raise, and being very clear about that, developing relationships across your company where you have those sponsors able to advocate for you with raises and promotions as well. That's so empowering to be able to do and not have to depend on massive organizational change in order for you to start achieving equity and sponsoring others and achieving that for themselves too. That was really well stated. Thank you.
So, Michael, what you were talking about in the HR world is called banding. Every company needs to have banding. But the simple answer, how do you achieve pay equity? Pay people equally. You know what you're paying your people. You know when you're paying other people more than other people. Pay people equitably, period.
Yeah, this is not rocket science. I'm right there where Frank is. You know what you're paying. I mean, I don't see any sense in complicating something that should be very simple.
Right. And one final note from me on that. The Supreme Court set a ruling that if you can show statistically that there is a bias in a system, like, and this was for housing, if you can show through statistics that there is a bias, then the intent of of racism or the intent of a sexism or any other ism doesn't matter. Your system is racist, and you are liable for how your system operates, and that's applied to housing right now, and it's a precedent. I'm not a lawyer, but using that as a precedent, you can argue, hey, we can show statistically that your pay is biased, and like from the event at Google where people shared their salaries, that was shown. So tech companies, pay attention. You might be exposing yourself to legal action by not fixing this problem.
I'm also okay if tech companies do not listen and we have to take legal action and get more money. That's okay too.
Also, yeah, personal branding is like you said, Valerie, like promoting yourself, showing off your skills, and then saying you like what you see, pay me. You know, I've shown I might have shown a few skills here. Let's talk. Reviews are coming up soon.
Yeah, actually, referencing Brittany's talk about journaling, dev journaling, that is actually something I started suggesting to people to do so that they can build their own brag sheets. They know exactly what they worked on, who they worked with, what they accomplished, and use that for reviews.
It's awesome idea.
All right, so the next topic we want to talk about is mental health illness. How does the pressure of technology and all of these things we talk about, the um, the imposter syndrome, the microaggressions, having to explain how to not be racist to people. And I hate that word. I'm not a racist. Uh, you might not think of yourself as a racist, but sometimes the things you do are racist, and you need to address those. And when we say, "Hey, that's racist," don't take it personally. Just don't be racist. You are being racist. Don't continue doing it. Adjust for it and move forward. So side note, but how do we talk? How do we address mental illness and talking about, of course, the stigma that we have in the Black community about talking things out and seeking psychological and psychiatric help? How do we deal with this load we're bearing as strangers in a strange land?
Well, I'll start. I'm an advocate for it. And I lost my daughter. She was in college. I lost her at 21 years of age. She was my only child. And that was extremely devastating. And there were some other things as well. I won't get too deep in the weeds. And for the first time in my life, I had to really seek counseling. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. That was 4 years ago. Had I known 15, 20 years ago what I learned 4 years ago, I would have sought the help of a professional counselor way back then, because being in IT and in the tech space, and I've told my staff this on several occasions, we live in somewhat of a thankless environment. There aren't a lot of pats on the backs or acknowledgement for the work that you've actually done. Most of the time, when we hear from people, it's because they're screaming, it's a problem. They've got a problem. And I often tell my people that, your accolade comes. Now, I give them all the time, but I often say that you get accolades from other people when you don't hear anything from them, because it's true that no news is good news in the space that I work in. But it has become beneficial to me to actually be in counseling sessions. I do it as an ongoing basis now, once a month, to have someone where you can share and offload, and not have to worry about burdening those, your loved ones at home. And you want that safe place at home as well. But there comes a time when you need to be able to just do or say what you can't say to family, to say what you can't say to people at work, because you don't want to have all of that pent up aggression inside that all of a sudden spills out in ways that you may not even be aware of. You may say things that you didn't even know that was in you. And then have somebody, recount a conversation that you had and you can't recall a thing because you were speaking out of emotion, or you were doing something that you were unaware of because of all of the pent up, frustration and aggression that you had inside of you. I am a huge advocate for it, a huge. And there are times when I tell my counselor, I feel like you should be paying me because I do most of the talking in these sessions. But it helps. I mean, it helps in a tremendous way. And I really think I was watching this show. I forgot what network it's on, called Billions. Have you all ever seen that? And why they have like the counseling internal, I love that show. I said, boy, I mean, and I work in an environment where fortunately we do have a counseling department that we can go and see, and I try to encourage the staff to take advantage of that. But that is something that I don't know how many companies actually offer that, but that would be something, to advocate for. I don't think most companies have that. Insurance finally recognizes, most insurance I think recognizes mental health as being, something that can be covered. And so, as a culture, especially in our culture, it's looked upon as a stigma. If you're going to see someone, then something must be wrong with you. We don't do that kind of thing. We pray about it, or we ignore it, or we talk it over with family, that kind of stuff. That don't work. You need somebody where you can just dump and then be given tools to actually move forward.
So I don't share this with many people, but Frank, Portia, one thing to address the psychology, address the hits that you take in this career. You need a circle, an inner circle of friends that you can trust and that uplifts you and supports you. My circle has, we established ourselves around 8 years ago, and we talk every day on Facebook, on Messenger, and we just shoot the breeze, fire off ideas, and just talk about all the crap that's going on in the world. And it's a fortress. We're allowed to be vulnerable. We're allowed to tell people things we wouldn't tell anyone else. What's hounded me the majority of my adult life is that, I did not complete my degree, and I left the school that I cherish dearly and have a conflict of emotions about because of what was going on there. But I left because I was asked to leave. I did not adjust well moving in there. It was too much freedom at once. Grew up in a very strict household where, there was never an option of are you going to class? And then it's like a world of freedom that I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't told, hey, you're going to be tempted not to go to class, but you're going to want to go to class. And I'm not a first gen student. Unlike the thoughts of my director at my high school, I'm not a first gen student. I have other members of my family who have. My aunt is a doctor. My grandpa is a master's in chemistry. There's a bunch of my family that have degrees, that have experienced the college life, but unfortunately, I didn't know to reach out to them, and they didn't reach out to me to prepare me for it. And so I had so many issues there, and I didn't succeed. And so the majority of my life, I've had a nightmare where I go through orientation to failing class and leaving the school all in the same dream, right all the way through. And I've had that nightmare for 22 years until I joined here at Microsoft, where I felt like I succeeded. I wasn't failing anymore. And that is one thing that is imperative. I feel so fortunate that, yes, when I was being excluded and being filtered out, I applied over 6 times to Microsoft, and I told my wife when I got it this time, 6 times the charm. So when I was being filtered out, I'm grateful that I didn't get in on those teams because I would have washed out there probably because I wasn't invited. The landing that I had at Microsoft, thanks to my manager, and it showed forth from our conversation when I interviewed him. He was very frank and candid, and he's like, "Look, let's talk." And it was refreshing, and I knew that it was someone I would be able to work with and be happy to work with. And the way he supported me over this past year has just made all the difference. Like I said, I wouldn't even be in the proper mindset to pursue this goal of this conference if I wasn't there. Um, so I think it's not just about you can have you need to talk to someone. Get your circle of friends. They said, you're the product of the five people you hang around with, the five closest people you hang around with. Make sure those people are people who are uplifting you. Make sure those people are people who are about something and who are someone you aspire to be. Um, and establish that bond and that circle and that area of trust. Like I said, they've listened to me shoot off so many harebrained ideas. I made a subscription box and I failed at it, but I learned a lot about how to market. I use Facebook, I use Twitter to market and get my first sales. And I also learned a lesson that, hey, maybe you should buy your inventory before you try and sell it. So having that circle that listens to you and calls you out on your bullshit too, is important. That's part of mental health. Being able to, in technology, we call it rubber ducking, just talking out. You get a rubber duck and you talk to it when you're having a problem, and all of a sudden just speaking out what the problem is allows you to solve it. So having someone you can talk to, having that, like you said, the psychiatrist where you're doing all the talking, Lance, just being able to verbalize it helps you process it and move through it and make something of it. So,
I think y'all two nailed it from different areas, right? Lance talked about, I think, something that is very important, which is the systemic support, right? Making sure that your company values getting help, values mental health, and makes space for it either by providing it directly or by making sure that it is part of the health insurance, right? That is a systemic way of addressing it. Michael, you talked about a grassroots way of addressing it, right? Bringing your people, surrounding yourself with your people, making a safe space on your own for yourself so that you can talk with people and say, you know what, am I crazy or am I not crazy, right? What's coming at me here, right? You need your people to be able to validate you, to be able to help understand what's going on. So you need your own circle and you need a systemic way of addressing it as well. And we have to attack it from both ways. I think you know this, Michael. I got kicked out first semester from Williams College, right? First semester up there, snot-nosed boy from Brooklyn, never been out of Brooklyn my whole life. Duffel bag, Cypress Hills hat over my eyes, boombox on my shoulder, go up to Williams College, first semester, kicked out, go in front of the committee on academic standing. They're like, we're kicking you out for your own good. I'm like, I didn't say this, but I'm like, you're sending me back to crack-infested Brooklyn for my own good. Like, I don't get that. But that's the systemic part, right? I went to Hunter College. I became a bike messenger. I went to Hunter College, made up the classes. I went to El Centro de Estudiantes Puertorriqueños, the Student Center for Puerto Rican Studies. I got woke. I learned, right? And I learned when they're telling me they're kicking me out for my own good, it's because they don't know me, right? They know their typical clientele. And if you're not doing well, daddy will give you a job, you learn responsibility, you come back wiser and this, that, and the other. They didn't know us. They didn't know how to deal with us. That's part of the systemic portion. You've got to break down the systemic portion. And then what sustained me at Williams was the Black Student Union, was the Students of Caribbean Ancestry, was the Vista, right? It was us getting our people together, playing spades at the U, right? Throwing down in the kitchen, right? That's what helped get us through there, right? With all this other stuff we had coming down at us, we have to get ourselves together, and we have to support us, and we have to demand the systemic change as well. That's why we went on that hunger strike, right? I feel bad, we can't, but we got to do what we can. We got to change it on both ends. We got to bring our people around us to support us, and we got to bring our people around us to make the systemic change that needs to happen.
I think what you're talking about, Frank, it's perfect, because when you are othered in any space, whether it's work, whether it's where you live, whatever it may be, school, whatever, you have to find your own community to fall back on. And they have to push positive coping mechanisms, and they can't be something that you can use to just get by. Like, it has to be something positive. But I think the other thing that we need to do too is talk about bring about the fact that mental health and getting help for that's normal. That should be just as normal as going to the doctor when you have a broken arm. Like, it doesn't matter how positive or how uplifting or how spiritual your community may be, if they don't understand that base level understanding of mental health, it's not going to help you. You're going to keep going through those cycles and not know how to cope, not know how to adjust, or maybe even ask for the right type of help. Because sometimes when you're going through these things, especially when it comes to mental health, you don't know what's going on. Like, outside of experts and professionals, you can Google stuff and try to come up with ideas, but you need to talk to a professional. And so unless our communities start talking about this more openly and start explaining why mental health is so important, why it's needed, why Black people actually get depressed, and it's not because we're strong or anything like that and we can just work through it, we do suffer from depression. I was reading a study that said that Black youth are experiencing suicide at a higher rate than we've ever seen before. This is a really big problem in our community. Things are changing, and we don't know how to cope with them. Like, we can talk and work through it and laugh through it, because I think as the Black community, that's what we do. We find ways to cope and to make things better, and we are really good at having fun and laughing things off. It's just a part of our culture, but sometimes we need to go out and seek that extra help. I know that I am someone who is a big advocate of therapy. If you talk to me on a normal basis, I'm asking you how you're doing, how's your stress levels, how are those things going, how's your therapist, do you need help finding one? I have a note in my phone with a list of resources that will help you find a therapist. Because if we want to get real about therapy and about mental health and about dealing with all of this being Black, not every therapist is going to be for you.
That's right.
Period. There's no other way around that. We need to start talking about these things more often and do it in a public space, and make sure that everyone is aware and that they are educated and they have access to resources. And I know that therapy is not accessible to everyone because it's just expensive. If you go through the Medicaid, I forget the correct term for it, but if you go through free services to try to get mental health help or services, it doesn't really work. It's very hard to find therapists that accept your insurance. It's something that it's not reachable to all of us. And so I think that's something else that we need to look at and we need to try to address and find some solution for. But their mental health, as a Black technologist, it's real. Like, working in tech can be very depressing. I myself suffer from depression on and off because of life. And I don't think entering tech made that any better, because I can learn how to do all of these things and I can be really great at my job, but I still have to jump through hoops to be seen as a developer or to be seen as competent, which is true in every industry. Because I am Black and because I am a woman, everyone's going to think less of me because of those things. But for some reason in tech, it's amplified.
Mike, I'm sorry, Valerie.
Go ahead. No, I'm done.
No, I'm just going to add this really quick thing. So there are resources out there, and this is a matter of just educating people. There are resources out there that are free and reputable, and so I won't bother going through all of that right now. But if anyone wants to just come to my Twitter page that I just started today, I will make a commitment that within 24 hours, I have some wonderful resources and people. I know that there are some of them are watching right now. So I'll get them to help me, and I will list those resources on the site. And I strongly take or advise people, encourage people to take advantage. So I figure out how to tweet. Okay, so anyway, go ahead.
Maybe we can add that to the email so it goes out to everyone.
Sure, good idea.
All right, let's do one more round of Ben. What do we do going forward? What can we take from here, and what can we, how can we move forward from this moment?
I think there were some actionable items that came out of this that were really good. You know, one of which being, if we just kind of work backwards, one of which being providing resources. We can use this platform to actually find those resources and then give people a reason to come back. But when they come back, you know, there's something that tangible, you know, for them to walk away with every time they actually come back. So, you know, there is the access to mental health. There is a lot of the things that we talked about in reference to just kind of giving guidance, you know, talking about salary and kind of mentorship. And we talked about sponsorship. But I think even in reference to me being convicted by what Valerie was saying earlier, and just kind of, you know, doing my part, making people aware that issuing security or providing security awareness and things of that nature.
Thanks, Lance.
Mm-hmm.
Frank?
Just very quickly, using this platform, using it for education, like Lance said, using it for calls to actions. Let's identify calls to actions that can mobilize effectively in making change. So let's try and figure that out collectively together. I think those are two core things. And then personally, again, like Lance said, redoubling the effort and making sure that I continue and we continue to speak truth to power, and that we also sponsor and bring our people up. And it's okay to bring our people up. You know, whether someone else thinks they're qualified or not, we don't give a what. Sponsor our people. We support our people. We become rungs in a ladder, not crabs in a barrel.
All right, Valerie or Portia?
I would only add something that both Frank and Valerie inspired me to think of differently today, and so thank you, is take your ego out of it and be willing to listen to the person that you don't necessarily listen to even first. That's at least from this stage, knowing that if you're already the plug, right? I like to think of myself as the plug and how many people I've given the hookup to, right? And that is, you have your practice, you have your resources of your therapy, of your counselors, of your ministers, right? Like combining all of your resources to be the healthiest you can be, but respecting that in these spaces, it really isn't all about you individually. That can go very far.
Awesome. Valerie?
I think the best thing that we can do is support people who are already doing the work. There are a number of communities out there that are taking on a lot of the action notes that we are calling out. And if we put our efforts towards that, it's going to have a bigger effect of us trying to then spin up a lot of one-off smaller things instead of coming together. So really focusing on empowering ourselves and our communities by coming together as leaders.
Awesome. Okay, thank you everyone for such insightful conversation. We need to keep it going. Our plan is to have our town hall on a regular basis. We'll suss out the details on that after everyone recovers from the conference. I want to thank my team for such a wonderful job putting this on.
Yeah.
All the compliments that are flying by about how impressive it is. And I'm not going to say for 2 weeks. I say it's damned impressive. Period.
Mhm.
I'll hold this up to any other conference out there, and um, I go toe to toe with them because this team did an amazing job, remarkable work, and I'm so grateful for them. Our conference going forward can expand beyond tech. We can be cross industry. We can be finance. We can be retail. We could be anyone. We have a year until the next Juneteenth, and I want to see more voices. I want to see more perspectives, and I want to see more Black excellence.
Awesome.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And this is the end of the conference, but it's not the last you'll hear from us. Stay tuned.